Do you hear it? The echoes of the past, the whispers of forgotten truths, fragments of memories lost in the shadows. Welcome to BRAINROT, Echoes, where we bring you stories long buried, unravel mysteries cloaked by time, and guide you through the darkest corners of the mind and the universe. Each video is more than just content. It's an echo resonating deep within, urging you to question, to wonder, to explore. Backend index pointing right, hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and join us in listening to the echoes the world tried to silence. Why don't you run, human? The question hung in the air like a bad smell at a dinner party, unwelcome, persistent, and making everyone uncomfortable. Zixara's 4 eyes blinked in perfect synchronization as she studied the bipedal creature slouched against the plasma barrier of his cell. She'd expected screaming, begging, maybe some of that delightful human sobbing she'd heard so much about. Instead, the human designated TX-7739, though his species strictly insisted on calling him Dave, just looked bored. Run where exactly? Dave gestured around his transparent prison with the enthusiasm of someone explaining why pineapple belongs on pizza to a food purist. I'm in a box. Unless you're suggesting I do laps, which honestly sounds like cardio, and I'm not really about that life. Zixara's tail twitched, a sure sign of confusion among her species, the Vorthak. As the ship's primary interrogation specialist, she'd broken creatures from 17 different systems. She'd reduced the proud warriors of Kepler 442b to whimpering masses. She'd made the hive minds of the Centauri cluster beg for mercy with their collective consciousness. But this human was treating his impending doom like a minor inconvenience. "You are aware," she said slowly, her translator device struggling with the concept of sarcasm, "that you're going to die? Yeah, I picked up on that when you guys blew up my ship, abducted me from the escape pod, and threw me in what I can only describe as a space fishbowl." Dave examined his fingernails with the sort of casual interest usually reserved for checking the weather. Top marks for subtlety, by the way. Really kept me guessing about your intentions. The Vorthak interrogator felt something she hadn't experienced in her 30 cycles of service: uncertainty. According to their extensive research on human psychology, terror was supposed to be the default response to capture. Their xenobiologists had provided detailed reports on human stress responses: elevated heart rate, perspiration, loss of bowel control. Yet this specimen seemed to have the emotional range of a Martian rock. Your species, Zixara consulted her data pad, exhibits extreme fear responses when faced with predators or dangerous situations. Our psychology profiles indicate that 97.3% of humans experience panic when confronted with imminent death. Wow, you guys really did your homework. Dave's tone suggested he was impressed, the way someone might be impressed by a toddler successfully tying their shoes. Let me guess, you studied us by watching our entertainment media, movies, TV shows, that sort of thing? The slight greenish tint that crept up Zixara's neck was the Vorthak equivalent of a blush. Our intelligence-gathering methods are thorough, but fundamental flaws. See, here's the thing about humans, Dave interrupted, settling more comfortably against the barrier. And I'm about to blow your mind here. We're actually quite adaptable. Shockingly so, in fact. You want to know why I'm not running around screaming? Despite herself, Zixara found herself leaning forward. This wasn't in any of the interrogation protocols. Because Dave continued with the air of someone explaining basic arithmetic to a particularly slow child, I've already been through my daily allotment of existential terror. And frankly, it's exhausting. You know what happened to me last Tuesday? My coffee maker broke. You know what I did? I fixed it with a paperclip, some electrical tape, and what I can only describe as spite-fueled engineering. Wednesday, traffic jam for 3 hours because some idiot decided to relocate a herd of space cattle during rush hour. Thursday, food poisoning from a restaurant that claimed their synth food was artisanal. Friday, my ex called. He paused for dramatic effect. Compared to my ex calling, alien abduction is practically a vacation. Zixara's other set of eyes began blinking independently, a sign of severe mental distress. Nothing in her training had prepared her for this. Where was the begging, the bargaining, the completely reasonable fear of imminent vivisection? But you will be studied, she said, grasping for familiar ground. Dissected. We will learn the secrets of human physiology. Discover what makes your species so persistent. Persistent, Dave laughed. And it wasn't the bitter, hollow laugh of despair she'd expected. It was genuine amusement. Lady, you haven't seen persistent. You want to know what persistent looks like? Humans once spent 40 years trying to build a tunnel through a mountain because going around it would take an extra hour. We've had people spend decades trying to prove the Earth is flat just because they didn't like being told they were wrong. We invented entire mathematical systems just to win arguments. This is irrelevant, Zixara snapped, though her tail was now twitching rapidly. Your species' stubbornness will not save you from our research protocols. Research protocols? Dave rolled his eyes with the practiced ease of someone who'd perfected the gesture over decades of dealing with bureaucracy. Let me take a wild guess here. You're going to start with basic physiological measurements, work your way up to stress testing, maybe throw in some psychological evaluation, and eventually graduate to the fun stuff involving sharp objects and internal organs. The fact that he'd accurately described their entire scientific methodology was disturbing enough. The fact that he seemed utterly unconcerned by it was downright unsettling. Your predictions are accurate, Zixara admitted. Of course they are. You know why? Because every species that's ever tried to study humans has followed the exact same playbook. It's like you all went to the same Galactic University of Evil and took Advanced Alien Menacing 101 from the same professor. Dave stretched, seemingly unbothered by the fact that the gesture made the plasma containment field shimmer ominously. The Klaxons tried it about 50 years ago. Grabbed a bunch of colonists from the Outer Rim. Same deal. Mysterious alien abduction. Ominous threats, the whole 9 yards. You know what happened to them? Zixara didn't want to ask, but found herself speaking anyway. What happened? The humans they captured figured out how to turn their containment cells into impromptu chemistry labs, reverse-engineered their technology, took over their ship, and eventually convinced half the Klaxon crew to defect and start a jointly operated pizza delivery service in the Alpha Centauri system. Dave's grin was the sort of expression that should have been reassuring, but somehow managed to be vaguely threatening. I hear they make excellent deep dish. That's impossible. Is it though? Because the Zepyrians thought the same thing when they tried to use humans as gladiatorial entertainment. Figure we'd make good sport, throw us in an arena with some apex predators. Watch us get torn apart for the amusement of the crowd. And 3 months later, the humans had domesticated the predators, organized them into competing sports leagues, and somehow managed to corner the market on stadium concessions. The Zepyrians went from running blood sports to hosting what was essentially the Galactic Olympics, complete with merchandising deals and broadcast rights. Zixara was beginning to develop what humans would recognize as a headache, though her species called it cerebral dissonance. The confident pretense she'd felt when entering the interrogation chamber was rapidly being replaced by something uncomfortably close to doubt. Even if these stories are true, she said, though her voice was deprived of its earlier conviction, you are alone. One human against an entire ship of trained Vorthak warriors. One human, Dave agreed cheerfully. Just me. Completely isolated. No backup. No weapons. No apparent means of escape. He paused, studying his fingernails again. Question for you, though. How exactly did you guys manage to track down my ship in the first place? The change of subject caught Zixara off guard. Your vessel was detected entering our territorial space without authorization. Standard protocol is to, right? But how did you detect it? Dave's tone was conversational, like someone asking about the weather. I was running pretty quiet. Minimal emissions, passive sensors only. Really trying to keep a low profile. It's almost like you were expecting me. A cold sensation began creeping up Zixara's spine, or what passed for a spine in Vorthak anatomy. What are you implying? Oh, I'm not implying anything. I'm stating it outright. Dave's grin broadened. You were expecting me because someone told you I was coming. Someone who knew my route, my ship's specifications, and exactly when I'd be passing through this system. That's impossible. We have no contacts among your species. Don't you? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Zixara felt her confidence draining away like water through a broken containment seal. The human's calm demeanor, which had initially seemed like shock or stupidity, was beginning to look like something else entirely, something much worse. See, here's the thing about humans, Dave continued, settling back against the barrier with the satisfied air of someone about to deliver a particularly good punchline. We're not just persistent. We're not just adaptable. We're paranoid. Magnificently, creatively, obsessively paranoid. You know what that means? Zixara was afraid to ask, but her mouth moved. What does it mean? It means that when the Galactic Council started making noises about the human problem and necessary research and acceptable losses for the greater good, we started paying attention. It means that when species after species began having mysterious equipment failures around human space, we noticed patterns. It means that when 3 different alien civilizations suddenly developed an interest in human biology within the same decade, we connected some dots. Dave's expression hadn't changed, but something in his eyes had gone very, very cold. You want to know why I'm not scared? Because I've been expecting this conversation for the better part of 6 months. You want to know why I'm not trying to escape? Because I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. That makes no sense, doesn't it? Think about it. Lone human ship, conveniently detectable, vulnerable, conveniently captured. Perfect specimen for your research program. Almost too good to be true, wouldn't you say? The headache Zixara was developing was rapidly becoming a full-blown cranial emergency. You're suggesting this was deliberate? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you flat out that every single thing that's happened in the last 72 hours has gone exactly according to plan. My plan, specifically. But why would you? Because someone needed to find out exactly what you people are up to, and I drew the short straw. Dave examined his fingernails again, as if the conversation was only mildly interesting to him. Well, I said I drew the short straw. Actually, I volunteered. Seemed like it might be educational. The plasma barrier flickered slightly, and Zixes glimpsed at it with growing alarm. Containment systems didn't just flicker without reason. That's impossible, she said. But her voice lacked conviction. Our security protocols are based on keeping prisoners in, not keeping help out. Dave's grin was becoming truly unsettling. Now you know what's really fascinating about Vorthak technology? It's incredibly sophisticated, but follows very predictable patterns. Almost like you guys learned everything from the same textbooks. The lights in the interrogation chamber dimmed slightly, then returned to normal, then dimmed again. What's happening? Zixes demanded, her tail now thrashing in obvious distress. Oh, that's probably the part where my colleagues finish their analysis of your ship systems and start implementing what we in the business like to call aggressive negotiations. Dave stretched again, seemingly oblivious to the growing chaos around them. You know, I have to say, for a species that prides itself on technological superiority, you guys have some pretty glaring security flaws. That's impossible. This ship is controlled by a central AI that makes decisions based on logical hierarchies and standardized protocols. Yeah, we figured that out about 20 minutes after I came aboard, Dave replied. Turns out, when your entire operational philosophy is based on rigid logical frameworks, you become predictable. And when you become predictable, the lights went out completely, plunging the chamber into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in an ominous red glow. You become hazardous, Dave concluded cheerfully. Alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Not the orderly, controlled alerts that indicated minor technical difficulties, but the sort of desperate, escalating warnings that suggested someone had just realized their entire existence was in jeopardy. This is impossible, Zixes repeated, but she was beginning to sound like a broken record. Humans don't have the technology to hack your systems, disable your defenses, take control of your ship. Dave's voice was still conversational, but there was something underneath it now. Something that spoke of depths Zixara was only beginning to comprehend. Lady, humans have been taking things apart and putting them back together in ways they were never meant to work since before we figured out fire. You think a little thing like advanced alien technology is going to slow us down? The containment field around Dave's cell flickered once, twice, then dissolved entirely. He stepped out of the plasma cage with the casual air of someone leaving an elevator. The thing about humans, he said, brushing imaginary dust off his clothes, is that we're really, really good at learning, especially when we're motivated. And you know what's motivating? Being told that an entire species considers you nothing more than lab rats. Zixara backed against the wall, her 4 eyes wide with something that was rapidly approaching terror. The other humans flicker. How many? Oh, there aren't any other humans on the ship, Dave said helpfully. At least not in person. But see, that's the beautiful thing about human technology. We don't actually need to be physically present to ruin your day. The door to the interrogation chamber slid open with a cheerful chime that seemed wildly inappropriate given the circumstances. The corridor beyond was filled with emergency lighting and the distant sounds of what could only be described as controlled chaos. What completely did you do? Zixara whispered. Me? I didn't do anything. I just sat here and had a conversation. Dave headed for the door, then paused and looked back. Oh, but the AI virus my ship uploaded to your central systems when you so helpfully connected it to your docking bay. That's been having quite the party for the last 3 hours. Amazing what you can accomplish when someone's foolish enough to give you administrative access to their entire network. AI virus. Nothing too dramatic, Dave assured her with a sort of smile that definitely didn't reach his eyes. Just a little program that's been analytically analyzing your ship's operations, cataloging your technology, documenting your research programs, and transmitting everything back to the Human Colonial Administration. Oh, and it's also been making some minor adjustments to your life support systems, navigation controls, and weapons array. The ship shuddered slightly, as if to emphasize his point. Minor adjustments? Well, minor adjustment from my perspective, Dave scratched his chin. From yours? Let's just say you're going to want to find somewhere safe to sit down for the next few hours. Maybe invest in a good helmet. You can't just what? Disable your ship? Turn your own technology against you? Completely undermine your entire operation with nothing more than patience and a really good computer program? Dave's expression was pleasant, conversational, and absolutely terrifying. Zixes, that is your name, right? I picked it up from your ship's personnel files. Let me explain something about humans that your research apparently missed. He stepped fully into the hallway, and she noticed for the first time that the emergency lighting cast his shadow in ways that made him look much larger than he actually was. We're not just persistent, and we're not just adaptable. We're vindictive. Spectacularly, creatively, obsessively vindictive. You mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. You threaten our species, we take it personally. And when humans take something personally... The ship shuddered again, more violently this time. Well, let's just say that your people are about to get a very comprehensive education in exactly why every other species in the galaxy learned to leave us alone. This is an act of war, Zixara managed, though her voice was shaking. Va? Dave laughed, and this time it was the hollow, bitter sound she'd been expecting earlier. Lady, this isn't war. War implies that both sides have a chance of winning. What this is a demonstration, a very public, very thorough demonstration of exactly what happens when someone decides that humans are acceptable research subjects. The Galactic Council will do absolutely nothing, Dave finished. Because by the time we're done here, every species in the galaxy is going to understand that the phrase human experimentation is synonymous with extinction-level mistake. Your people want to study us. Congratulations. You're about to become a case study yourselves. The ship's shuddering was becoming more pronounced now, and Zixara could hear the distant sounds of structural stress. Whatever the humans' AI virus was doing to their systems, it was nothing minor. You're going to kill us all? She whispered. Kill you? Dave looked sincerely offended. What kind of monsters do you think we are? We're not going to kill anyone. We're just going to make some adjustments to your ship's trajectory, disable your weapons and communication systems, and send you on a little field trip. Field trip? Oh yes. See, there's this lovely little system about 3 weeks away from here. No intelligent life, plenty of resources, really quite habitable if you don't mind a slightly higher gravity and some creative weather patterns. Perfect place for a species to start over and really think about their life choices. Dave started walking down the corridor, and despite every instinct screaming at her to run in the opposite direction, Zixara found herself following. You can't just, can I? Dave tilted his head at her with raised eyebrows. Zixes, your people have been scientifically abducting and experimenting on members of my species for months. You've been planning to dissect me and study my remains. You've been treating humans like we're nothing more than interesting biological specimens. And you're worried about being stranded on a perfectly habitable planet with all the resources you need to build a new civilization. But our ship, our technology, will work just fine for basic life support and planetary colonization. The AI virus isn't destructive. It's educational. By the time you reach your new home, you'll have a complete understanding of exactly how your technology actually functions, rather than just how to use it. They passed several other Vorthak crew members in the corridors, all of whom were either hunched over control panels, trying to regain control of their systems, or sitting on the floor looking shell-shocked. None of them paid any attention to the human walking freely among them. This is because of the containment field, isn't it? Zixes asked suddenly. You wanted us to connect your ship to our systems. Got there eventually, Dave said approvingly. Although I have to say, it took you longer than I expected. Most species figure out they've been had within the first hour. How long have you been planning this specific operation? About 6 months. But the general approach, we've been developing contingencies for hostile alien contact since we first started expanding beyond our home system. Dave paused at an intersection, consulting what appeared to be a map that had been helpfully displayed on one of the wall monitors. Left or right to get to your ship's central command? Left, Zixara said automatically, then immediately regretted providing the information. Thanks. You know, for a species that prides itself on logical thinking, you people are remarkably bad at strategic planning. What do you mean? I mean, you decided to mess with a species that spent most of its evolutionary history figuring out increasingly creative ways to kill things that were stronger and better armed than we were. Dave turned left, walking with the confident stride of someone who knew exactly where they were going. Did your research mention that humans are persistence hunters? Persistence hunters? We chase prey until it dies of exhaustion. Not because we're faster or stronger, but because we're too stubborn to quit. Dave's grin was back, and it was every bit as unsettling as before. Turns out that's a pretty useful trait when applied to other areas of life. They reached the ship's central command center, where the scene was considerably more chaotic than the corridors had been. Vorthak crew members were frantically working at control stations, their 4 eyes wide with panic as they tried to regain control of their own systems. Captain Theaksmore, Zixara called to a particularly large Vorthak who was shouting orders at anyone within hearing range. The human has escaped containment. Captain Theaksmore turned to look at them, and his expression went through several interesting changes as he processed the situation. First confusion, then recognition, then something that might have been despair. You, he said, pointing at Dave with one of his forearms. You did this. Guilty as charged, Dave agreed cheerfully. Although in my defense, you guys started it. I'm just finishing it. Our ship is currently on course for a lovely little planet in the Kepler 438 system, where you'll have plenty of time to think about your poor decision-making skills. Dave walked over to one of the control stations and peered at the displays with the sort of casual interest someone might show in a museum exhibit. Oh, that's clever. Your AI has been trying to purge the virus for the last hour, but every time it thinks it succeeded, 3 more copies activated from hidden partitions. You're describing our own systems to us, Captain Theaksmore said with what might have been professional admiration. How was that possible? Because for the last 3 hours, I've been getting a complete technical education courtesy of your ship's own databases, Dave explained. Amazing what you can learn when you have unrestricted access to someone's accumulated knowledge. Your people have been very thorough in documenting their technological capabilities. The Galactic Council will consider this an act of... The Galactic Council, Dave interrupted, is about to receive a very comprehensive report on the Vorthak research program, including detailed documentation of your methods, your goals, and your complete disregard for sentient rights. They're also going to receive technical specifications for every piece of technology on this ship, along with a full analysis of its capabilities and limitations. Dave turned away from the control station and addressed the entire command crew. Here's what's going to happen. In approximately 6 hours, you're going to arrive at Kepler 438b, where you'll have what you need to establish a sustainable colony. Your ship's fabrication systems will remain operational. Your life support will continue to function, and you'll have access to all the technical knowledge necessary to build a new civilization. But not to leave, Captain Feexmore said. Not to leave, Dave confirmed. At least not until you've demonstrated that you understand why experimenting on sentient beings without their consent is problematic. We estimate that should take about 50 to 75 years, depending on how quickly you adapt to your new circumstances. And if we refuse... Dave's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went very cold again. Then you'll discover that humans can be remarkably creative when it comes to making life unpleasant for people who've angered us. The AI virus is currently running your ship. That's the polite version. We have much less friendly alternatives. The command center fell silent except for the sound of various alarms and the occasional spark from overtaxed control systems. This is impossible, Captain Feexmore said finally. One human acting alone could not possibly not infiltrate your ship, subvert your systems, and completely undermine your operation. Dave's smile was back. Captain, that's the thing about humans. We specialize in impossible. But how? Years of preparation, months of planning, and about 3 hours of really good computer programming, Dave explained. Oh, and the fact that your people are so convinced of your own superiority that it never occurred to you that a primitive human might actually be dangerous. The other species warned us that humans were stubborn, Zixara said quietly. They said you were difficult to control, but manageable. The other species, Dave said with obvious amusement, lied to you. They lied because they wanted you to make the same mistakes they made. And they wanted to watch what happened when you did. What do you mean? I mean that every species that's ever tangled with humanity has learned the same lesson the hard way. We don't just fight back. We fight back creatively. And once we've beaten you, once we make sure everyone else knows exactly how to beat you too. Dave gestured around the command center. This is going to be a textbook case study in what happens when you underestimate humans. Every species in the galaxy is going to know exactly how you were defeated, by whom, and why. You're going to make us a laughingstock, Captain Feexmore realized. I'm going to make you an example, Dave corrected. A very public, very thorough example of why it's a bad idea to mess with humanity. The ship shuddered again, and several more alarms joined the chorus of warning sounds. How long until we reach this planet? Zixes asked. About 5 hours, 57 minutes. Dave checked what appeared to be a countdown timer on one of the displays. Give or take a few minutes for orbital insertion. And then you get to start over, building a new society, develop some better decision-making skills, maybe learn to appreciate the value of informed consent. Dave headed for the exit, then paused. Oh, and just so you know, we'll be checking in on you occasionally. Humans are very good at holding grudges, but we're also surprisingly generous with second chances. Impress us with how much you've learned, and we might even be willing to discuss restoring your interstellar travel capabilities. Assuming you can demonstrate that you understand why kidnapping and experimenting on sentient beings is wrong, why informed consent matters, and why treating other species like laboratory animals is a fundamentally bad idea. Dave's expression was pleasant, conversational, and absolutely implacable. Think of it as a learning experience. And if we don't learn, Dave's smile was the sort of expression that should have been reassuring, but somehow managed to be utterly terrifying. Then you'll discover that humans have very long memories, very creative imaginations, and very little patience for species that refuse to evolve ethically. He paused at the doorway. But I'm sure it won't come to that. After all, You're supposed to be a logical, intelligent species. I'm confident you'll figure it out." With that, he disappeared into the corridor, leaving the Vorthak command crew to contemplate their rapidly approaching future as involuntary colonists. "Sir," one of the junior officers said quietly, "what do we do now?" Captain Theaksmore looked around the command center, taking in the sparking control panels, the flashing warning displays, and the expressions of barely controlled panic on his crew's faces. "We learn," he said finally. "We learned very quickly." Meanwhile, Dave made his way through the ship's corridors towards the docking bay where his own vessel waited. The AI virus had done its job perfectly. Not only had it completely subverted the Vorthak ship's systems, but it had also documented everything, transmitted the data back to human space, and prepared his own ship for departure. As he walked, he reflected on the conversation he'd just had. The Vorthak weren't evil exactly. They were just arrogant, short-sighted, and convinced of their own superiority. Like most species that decided to test themselves against humanity, they'd made the fundamental mistake of assuming that technological advancement was equivalent to tactical superiority. They'd learned better. They always did. Dave reached his ship and settled into the pilot's seat, running through the pre-flight checklist with practiced efficiency. The Vorthak vessel was already too far from any major shipping lanes to call for help, and by the time they reached their new home, the news of their defeat would have spread throughout the galaxy. Another lesson learned. Another example made. Another species that would think twice before deciding that humans made acceptable test subjects. Dave activated his communication system and opened a channel to Human Colonial Administration Headquarters. "Control, this is Agent Brennan. Operation Mousetrap is complete. The Vorthak research program has been terminated. Their ship has been redirected to the designated exile system, and all relevant intelligence has been transmitted to your servers." "Understood, Agent Brennan. Any complications?" Dave glanced at the Vorthak ship, which was already beginning to recede in the distance as his own vessel accelerated away from it. "None worth mentioning, though I have to say, whoever wrote that psychological profile on human fear responses really needs to update their research. These people have no idea what actually scares us." "And what does scare us, Agent Brennan?" Dave thought about that for a moment, watching the stars while past his viewports. "Running out of coffee," he said finally. "That, and having to deal with our ex-partners. Everything else is pretty manageable." "Copy that, Agent Brennan. Safe travels." Dave closed the communication channel and settled back in his seat, already planning his next mission. Somewhere out there, another species was probably making the same mistakes the Vorthak had made. Convinced that humanity's reputation for stubbornness and creativity was exaggerated. They'd learned better, too. They always did. After all, humans were very good teachers. They just remembered to use rather unconventional educational methods, and the tuition was always paid in full. 6 months later, the Galactic Council received a request for readmission to interstellar society from the Vorthak colony on Kepler 438b. The request included a formal apology for their previous research program, a detailed ethical framework for future scientific endeavors, and an offer to share their technological innovations with any species interested in peaceful cooperation. The request was approved unanimously. Humans, it turned out, really were surprisingly generous with second chances. As long as you learned your lesson the first time.